You don't
Josh,
have your coffee cup, do you? I'll cheers
I
you
was just
without it.
looking for it. I was like, where's the coffee cup?
I saw the panic come into your eyes. There it
I
is.
have a smoothie that I drank already, so
We
that's
love health, right? Like it's the healthy balance of working what 12, 14 hours a day and making sure you're still getting your
well,
vitamins in. I like it.
the fun fact about this smoothie is it's actually called a coffee crisp. It has espresso in it, so it
Oh.
technically is a coffee.
Oh, so you're balancing your caffeine addiction plus making sure the wife's staying happy that you're still getting some vegetables.
Yeah, it looks like, oh, wow, you went to the healthy smoothie shop, but really I just have like a latte that looks like a smoothie. But it is what's top of mind this week, Josh?
I don't know if you tuned into it, Ryan, but I know you're also a big fan of the All In podcast. And if anyone who's watching doesn't watch, highly recommend. They do an awesome job. Right now, they have the All In Summit going on. So they bring in a bunch of guest speakers. They just talk about topics, and it's a really, really cool event. It's on YouTube, so highly recommend it. But I did see one with Mark Benioff, who's obviously the CEO of Salesforce. Pretty big company out there if anyone's not heard of them. But one of the really cool things that Mark was talking about was obviously AI, because that's a huge bet that Salesforce is making with Einstein. And a couple things that Mark was mentioning was talking about hallucinations, temperature of AI, and a couple other points. And I was like, that could be a really interesting topic for all of us AI loving nerds out here too, who might want to learn a bit more. So, do you mind giving some insight to what hallucinations are in AI, what causes them, and maybe some strategic points that people can consider to help mitigate hallucinations?
Yeah, so first, I also watched that, and like what Mark was talking a lot about, Salesforce's customers are like some of the global banks, pharmaceutical companies, things like that, like the big enterprises in the landscape today. So obviously those businesses, just like every business, just like a recruiting firm, an executive search firm, a staffing firm, everybody's trying to implement AI to better their performance as a business. So how they're doing that for their enterprise customers is very similar to how we're doing it for our recruiting firm customers. And what both care about is the accuracy and therefore the value of implementing AI into their systems. Because if AI isn't accurate, you're not going to get any value out of it. It actually could do more harm than good. And the buzzword out there is hallucinations. Oh, this AI hallucinates, it's making up things. What a lot of people don't actually understand is that it's not a bug out of large language models and AI. Hallucinations is not a bug, it's actually a feature of AI. So when you actually look around how these models are built, what they essentially are is a statistical model that predicts what happens next rather than some form of like reasoning intelligence that reads everything, thinks about it, and then from there makes a judgment call. There's no sense of judgment. It's statistically predicting the next words in a sequence. And how this is configured from a creativity perspective to actually predict things is setting a level of temperature, is what they call it in AI. And what that is essentially allowing for is higher degrees or lesser degrees of creativity. So when we're thinking about making an AI model that's specifically designed for creative writers, they would want the temperature to be through the roof of their AI models, because then it's going to pull from many different aspects of a model that might be thinking outside of the box in a way that would be a better analogy for something like this. Whereas something that is a legal AI tool, you don't want it to just make things up. So your temperature needs to be very, very low in that regard. So it's not being too creative, but every AI model needs to be creative enough to, again, create that prediction. So there's no way to take that temperature to zero or else you'll get terrible outputs. So it's about, based on the use case that you're implementing an AI model for, what's the right balance of creativity that you can put in so it still gets you a good output, but doesn't make things up, which again is actually a feature of AI, not necessarily a bug.
Yeah, which is super cool, right? Because obviously it's not at a point yet where it's thinking for itself. That's Terminator. It's a little scary sometimes to think about. But to your point, it's predicting what should happen next based on the models it can use to see the sequence of events that might be happening. So obviously one element is going to be like the size of your model, right? If you're using something like Llama or Gemini or ChatGPT, these massive models, you obviously have a lot more context that you can use in order to test the temperature of how much insight does it get. But obviously, there's other things that we can look at, like prompting, which is, I know, one thing that we do a lot with our customers to make sure we're fine tuning that. And so we went through a bunch of different examples from a prompting standpoint, giving what you're looking for, an example maybe of what the outcome is that you're looking to achieve, and some of those other metrics as well. How would you think about prompting, or like examples to provide to help mitigate that, maybe the temperature, or does that not impact the temperature, it's only the results you're looking for? Like, how should others be thinking about ways that they can actually control things further? Because obviously the model might be outside of some people's control.
Well, for example, in Quill's case, we're using models with a lower temperature because we're interviewing candidates, we're getting information on those candidates, and we're creating materials that we want to be accurate to send to a hiring manager, for example. But as mentioned, we can't have the temperature to 0, or else you just wouldn't get good results when Quill's creating submittals or doing disc assessments, behavioral assessments, which naturally need some more creativity for it to actually give a meaningful output. So an example of creating a submittal, if you have a prompt that says, what was this candidate's compensation expectation? You're forcing it to give you an answer, right? Your instructions to the model is predict what the person, you're literally saying, by prompting, you're pretty much asking, hey, predict what this person's compensation expectation was based on the information I gave you, which in our case is like a transcript. It's going to give you an answer. So it would say 100K. In my model data set, most people make 100K, let's say, or 50K or 150K, whatever, it's an arbitrary number I'm giving. But that's the pattern that it sees the most. And therefore, that's the output it's going to give you, because how you wrote that prompt or asking for a prediction, that's what it's going to give you. Now, if you instead made the prompt or the prediction, what out of the information that was in the transcript, what was the compensation expectation if it was discussed? Well, then the best prediction says it wasn't discussed. So you're prompting, even though a temperature can be set in a certain model, can actually drive the hallucinations depending on kind of the constraints and the guardrails that you put in your prompt. And that's something we spend a lot of time helping our customers with and educating the market about. Is there's kind of 2 root causes to a hallucination. One is the model and the configuration of it. And then 2, how you're setting the guardrails in your prompts, or most importantly, not setting the guardrails in your prompts.
Speaking to AI is like another version of the English language, especially if you're doing it in English or whatever language you're prompting the AI in. Because if you ask it to do something, it'll find a way to get you that answer.
Were you a good student in university? I know I wasn't.
No, I was maybe like a 3.0, and I took sport and rec, so like take that with a grain of salt. Like I was like a B minus kind of student.
A good analogy for this, right? A good example is when you were on a multiple choice test, right? Like let's say I didn't study the day before, and now I have a bunch of multiple choice questions, and there's multiple choice questions that say this answer, this answer, this answer, and this answer. And then there's other multiple choice questions that say none of the above. You're essentially, by prompting, giving it a multiple choice question, right? And if I don't know the answer, just like if the AI doesn't know the answer, because there's not enough information given, you're setting that constraint, it's just gonna pick one of the answers. That's its prediction. It's like, it's my best guess. Maybe I'll get the mark right.
Sounds like my exams in university. This is a side story, but I remember one of the professors I had said that he purposely set up one of the multiple choice exams so every answer was C, so that people would freak out if they just saw all of them with C and they weren't sure, so that they would actually, I don't know. I thought that was really funny, but that gave me flashbacks to university days.
But I think the number one takeaway is just remember, like, shift your understanding from like what large language models and AI is, from this computer intelligence that like can know things and like make judgments for me, to it's a predictive model. You're giving it inputs and ask for a prediction. Like you're almost going to like a fortune teller. You're going to a fortune teller, you're asking the fortune teller questions, and then it's giving you a predictive output. When you understand like how that actually works, it can kind of wrap your head around what's going well with your use of AI versus the issues you're having implementing AI into your business, just by understanding the fundamental way it works.
Yeah, I think it's a great.
We're not super technical. I know a little bit of like HTML and CSS, But if you tried to get me to actually build anything like our team does here, I would have no idea. But just understanding that from a high level can be a really big help, and you understand how it can actually be impactful for your business.
Oh, 100%. It's even like when you start inputting prompts into AI, if you're not getting the answers you're looking for, what are different ways that you can troubleshoot how to fine tune what you're asking for to make sure you're actually getting a result that's more similar to what you're and predictable for what you'd be looking to see in the output. And I think that's just part of the game as we're all learning how do we be more effective as we're using things like AI prompts and any sort of learning models.
Yeah, and feel free, right? Like if you're noticing, like there's tons of models out there, like put your data set and your prompt in all these different models and see which one's actually more meaningful for your business because they're all configured differently. And that's why it's important to use a solution that's going to be more aligned to your use case.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Awesome. Well, that's what we have for you this week. We'll see you next week, and try not to make your AI hallucinate too much this week.
Talk to you, everyone.